some noise! As loud as you can! As loud as you can! As loud as you can! People over profits! People over profits! People over profits! People over profits!
People over profits! People over profits! People over profits! People over profits! People over profits! People over profits! Where are those cowbells? People over profits! 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 People over profits!
People over profits!
People over profits. People over profits. People over profits. Believe all other profits. People over profits. Believe all
pediatrics. I would like to review some important points about this bill. First, this is not an extreme approach. Parents can still get vaccine exemptions for their children if they choose. Families will still be able to obtain non-medical exemptions, and this bill does not change the process for medical exemptions. Vaccines are safe and an effective way to prevent against many diseases. Although nothing we do is without risk, vaccines are among the most studied and safest medications we have. Vaccines go through rigorous safety studies like all other drugs, and then vaccines are subject to additional ongoing post-licensure safety monitoring. We should remember that doing nothing about vaccine preventable diseases is also taking a risk. These diseases that vaccines protect against have real risk for children and people of all ages, and continuing to live with low vaccination rates puts our communities at risk. It seems like a distant memory now, but in late December of 2019, we saw an example of the impact that these risks have when we had 3 cases of measles in Denver. These children were hospitalized, and their illnesses caused serious disruption for the lives of their families. The impact of even this small number of cases is felt by worried families of other children who were exposed to a child with measles. Parents of children with cancer called their doctors, asking if they needed additional treatment to protect them from measles. Primary care physicians received calls from worried parents asking if they should give MMR vaccine early to protect their infants who would be at higher risk of severe disease if they encountered measles. Thanks to the hard work and cooperation of local and state public health officials as well as the hospital, these 3 cases did not lead to an outbreak at that time. However, the risk of such an outbreak was and remains extremely real with Colorado's low vaccination rates. Every parent and pediatrician who has spoken and who will speak today wants to do what's best for their children and the children in their community. This bill will help keep Colorado communities healthy at a time that is more important than ever, and I urge you to support Senate Bill 163 today, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony today. I apologize for the disruptive atmosphere that we find ourselves in. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Lopez-Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here. Dr. Cataldi, I hope this may be a tough question, so I apologize. We heard earlier testimony from a Dr. Akuja, who said she was trained in family practice, who said she was treating kids for reactions to vaccines. But what confused me, and I'm a pharmacist, but I was still confused about this, and I don't know if you got to hear any of that testimony, but she said that she was treating a child for a reaction to topical steroids, but it looked a lot like the same reaction to a vaccination, and it was an adverse event. I didn't know what to do with that testimony. Have you heard of such a thing, or did you get to hear it at all?
Dr. Cataldi.
Thank you for the question. I apologize, I did not get to hear that particular issue that she brought up. We do know that there are common vaccines that are not severe. They usually involve pain where the vaccine is given, fever, and we talk with parents about those side effects. The particular instance that you described, I didn't hear the details and I wouldn't be familiar.
Are there any other questions for these witnesses? Representative Mollica.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to both of you witnesses for coming in. Dr. Cataldi, I believe the question was asked of you earlier, but I think you're more of an expert in the area. Can you just speak to the importance of vaccines, the importance of having proper rates? I know that the MMR rate we're looking at is 95%, and where we're at. And can you just talk about that a little bit and the dangers to our community for not equity to do it?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question. You bring up the important issue of community protection, or sometimes referred to as herd immunity. And that's right that for measles in particular, which is in the MMR vaccine, measles is extremely contagious. It's actually the most contagious infectious disease that we know of. It's more contagious than COVID and other diseases. And so it unfortunately requires a very high level of protection in the community to prevent one case from spreading and leading to an outbreak very quickly. And so that's why with something like measles, we really have to reach for a very high coverage rate with keeping people protected so that we can stop outbreaks from happening if just one case occurs. For different diseases that are more or less contagious, there's a different threshold. And so that's why we often talk about measles, though, as one of the most contagious diseases, and that threshold.
Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is also for Dr. Cataldi. We had heard from a previous physician who testified that she learned nothing about vaccines and wasn't taught at all in medical school about how to think critically about vaccines or injury. They just were taught what the schedule was for administration of those vaccines. I'd like you to comment on your background and training that you received in medical school and if that was a common experience.
Dr. Cataldi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for the question. In fact, in medical school, students are taught about vaccine safety as well as the science behind vaccines, why they're given, how they generate an immune response, why that immune response is important. I can speak to my personal experience, and that I did learn those things in medical school, but then got additional training in those things going forward, becoming a pediatrician. And that's something that pediatricians, family physicians, anyone going into primary care does get additional training on after they finish medical school as well. I can also mention that here in Colorado, I do teach lots of different groups, including medical students, pharmacy students, our pediatric residents, about exactly those issues of why we give vaccines, what are those rare reactions that can happen after vaccination, what to do about them, why vaccines are important, and how vaccine safety is monitored.
Thank you. That's our total time for our witnesses today. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Our next witnesses are Andrea, and she knows that I can't pronounce the last name, so Andrea S. And Dr. Reggie Washington. And who would like to go first?
You.
Thank you.
Andrea S.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Andrea Stojsavovich, and I'm the policy manager at Healthier Colorado, a nonprofit nonpartisan organization that works to provide every Coloradan the opportunity to live a healthy life with policy-oriented solutions. I'm here today to urge your support for Senate Bill 163 because outside of the 30 organizations who have signed on in support of this bill, and outside of the proponents' voices you'll hear today, there exists broad support for this bill from signed by over almost 6,000 Coloradans, urging legislators to ensure Senate Bill 163's passage as they see the crucial importance of vaccines when it comes to our communities' overall public health and safety. Outside of that petition, we also have recent polling from May of 2020 conducted by Feeding Research, which means that it was put together by researchers in a science-based manner to ensure the poll is reflective of the state's population. And that poll showcased that the vast majority of Coloradans, regardless of political affiliation, from all parts of the state and of all ages, support policy to increase vaccination rates, including the specific elements of Senate Bill 163. This polling found that 88% of Coloradans believe that all children should be vaccinated against contagious diseases like measles, mumps, and chickenpox before attending school or a child care center. The poll also found that 79% would support a new state vaccine law, identical to Senate Bill 163, that would require parents obtaining a non-medical exemption to obtain signature from an immunizing provider or complete an online educational module. In closing,
Andrea, your time is over.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll wrap it up. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Washington.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Reginald Washington. I'm a pediatric cardiologist and a pediatrician. I work for the Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children, where I'm the chief medical officer. I also will note that I'm a second-generation Colorado native. I'm one of the few physicians through the 40 years that I've been practicing medicine that actually had the opportunity to treat children in fairly high numbers with measles and pertussis, and had the opportunity to witness the complications, including pneumonia and encephalitis, and I've actually witnessed a few patients pass away from these disorders. That is a shame now because we have immunizations that will prevent that. I have a few concerning observations I would like to share with you, and I'll not be redundant to what other speakers have said. You all know that the numbers of immunized children in Colorado are decreasing. What you may not be aware of, because of the COVID epidemic, well child visits where children get their immunizations are down as much as 60%. This is throughout the world. What that means is that throughout the world, measles will begin to increase, and we've seen how easily contagious diseases can spread to this country from other countries. That is a problem. I'm also disturbed by the comparison between the Tuskegee experience in blacks and the pertussis and other vaccination manufacturers and treatments in this country. There's really no association. We have heard in the past that there was an experiment in Los Angeles where the CDC exposed children unnecessarily to these vaccines. That is in fact not only not true, but David Satcher, who was the CDC director and then Surgeon General, established a center at Morehouse College of Medicine to study health disparities. Why would he condone something like that if he's devoting his life to disparities? With the time I have left, I would encourage you to pass this bill to protect children at their most vulnerable times in their lives. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. I'm going to start off with questions. You may not have heard because you were in the room, but we had a prior witness to bring up the Tuskegee Institute and the trusted government. I mean, you did bring it up, but could you talk a little bit more about your community and how you think that they feel about this overall?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is still a prevailing thought in some African Americans that there is a distrust of medicine, physicians, and the medical community in general. It's been recently studied in the COVID epidemic why African Americans are adversely affected more with COVID than any other population. I don't have time to tell you everything about that, but it is very clear that African Americans delay their presence to an emergency room when they're sick with COVID, so they seem to be much more ill when they present because of this fear of medicine. So that is in fact true. I will also, though, give you some context with that in the immunization arena. Children now in African American communities are immunized more than ever because they're accessing well child visits more than ever. So they're being vaccinated now at a greater number than they ever have. There's also an increase in autism in that population. However, that's because more children are being diagnosed with autism. Not that they have a greater rate of autism, they're just seeking medical care, where before African Americans were reluctant to seek that medical care, even though their children were having trouble. That's been documented in peer-reviewed studies. That's not hearsay. So I would summarize to say, yes, there is a distrust. However, African Americans are just as vulnerable to all these diseases as anybody else, and they deserve equal access to vaccination.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions from the committee? I saw Representative Williams is in first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and anyone on the panel can take this. My question is this. The stated goal is to increase vaccination rates. I think that's undisputed. That's the goal of this bill. But my question is, why is it appropriate to coerce parents who don't want to have their children vaccinated? So why is it okay to coerce them if they seek an exemption to take some sort of state-approved education aspect to any of this? Why is that okay?
Ms. S.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Williams. I think within this bill we are trying to balance folks having a choice, and I think folks who are getting their kids immunized are having to have a conversation with an immunizing provider about the risks and the safeties associated with that when they go into the doctor's office. And so I think we know there are folks in this state who have their own beliefs and obviously have religious beliefs as well. But I think we are balancing that with having the option of going to an immunizing provider to have that conversation, or if their mind's already made up or not, going through the educational module so that we know parents are well equipped with the information, no matter which side of this issue they're from. They're starting to receive that same information in a timely manner. And that's why we see that. I don't think it's a coercion, but it's an option to make sure that there's equal effort in the law. So that it's not easier to exempt oneself from the law than it is to comply with it. Thank you.
Representative, I would just add, we're going to have the same difficulty when the COVID vaccine comes about. People are going to say it's not, you can't make me take it. But then you have seen how prevalent that can be. We don't want measles and pertussis and the others to be just that prevalent with something we know we can prevent safely. So this bill gives an opportunity for families to become informed and then make an informed decision if they choose not to vaccinate their family. They at least have valuable and credible information to make that decision.
Okay, well, unfortunately, time is up for this panel. And everything I would offer is coming up Thank you both for coming in today. And I just wanted to know that was Dr. Washington's spoke to us. Our next witnesses are Irene Aguilar, MD, also known as Senior Aguilar, and Tracy Anselmo. Okay, welcome.
Comfort that these diseases are no longer a real or serious threat. Perhaps the COVID-19 experience will change that perception somewhat, but as a physician, let me assure you that conditions like whooping cough, measles, and polio are devastating. It is also quite expensive. According to the Colorado Hospital Association data from 2017, total hospital and emergency department charges for vaccine-preventable diseases in Colorado children were over $55 million. These are almost entirely available health care costs. Unfortunately, Colorado's children immunization rates are among the lowest in the country. This is partly attributable to the fact that we have one of the most lenient policies around vaccine requirements for school enrollment. Colorado is one of just 15 states that allow personal belief exemptions from vaccine requirements for school enrollment, and the process to choose the exemption today is actually easier than the process to comply with the vaccine requirement. Senate Bill 163 is a modest proposal to ensure all patients, whether they choose to vaccinate or not, are doing so with intentionality and not simply opting for the exemption because it is the easier and more convenient route. The bill also strengthens the state's immunization data system.
I'm sorry. You're over my
I tried to talk fast, but I didn't want to.
Thank you. Ms. Anselmo.
I am Tracy Anselmo, the Executive Director of the Colorado Association of Local Public Health Officials, representing the 53 local public health agencies which cover all 64 counties and serve every person that lives, works, and plays in the state. Thank you, Chairwoman, members of this committee. I am here today as a healthcare and public health professional, despite my concerns about the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, but I am here with 53 of my local public health director colleagues and hundreds of their staff who are still on the very front lines of this pandemic do not have to leave their critical work. Because you see, public health is all about prevention. It's about preventing disease, whether those diseases are caused by germs, unhealthy environments, or social inequities that plague our country. SB20-163 represents the very cornerstone of public health, the prevention of disease and prevention of premature death. I know that you have heard about Colorado's ranking in vaccine rates, but I would like to remind you that vaccines are heralded as one of the top 10 public health achievements in the 20th century. Vaccines have prevented premature death and unnecessary morbidity from infectious diseases of millions of people around the world. Vaccines have all but eradicated many of the diseases that have plagued mankind for centuries. The very foundations of public health are being shaken, tested, and stretched. Now more than ever, we understand, and it could not be more evident, why vaccinations are important to save lives. I implore you to support the common sense policy changes in SB20-163. That's why I'm here, because it's my job and the job of over 3,500 public health professionals in Colorado, and my sworn responsibility as a licensed healthcare professional to protect the public's health, and vaccines do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anselmo. So I'm going to start with questions. Senator Aguilar, are you pro-choice?
I am a pro-choice Democrat, and I did hear the testimony. This bill does not limit healthcare choices. Non-medical exemption is still available. However, this choice is fundamentally different than the choice one of my patients made as a Jehovah's Witness not to take a transfusion. In that case, only his health was in danger. When somebody chooses not to take a vaccine, the entire community's health could be endangered. And I think of people like my 97-year-old father who's living in my home, and my 65-year-old sister who takes immunosuppressants for rheumatoid arthritis. And I think that this is a very different choice where this choice impacts not your health, but the health of other people. And so I am very much pro-choice, but I do think that there is a value to public health. And if the choice affects only your health, that's very different than if the choice affects the health of other people who cannot seek the help they need on their own.
Are there any other questions, Representative Beasley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Aguilar. This bill has a feature in it to where if someone chooses to not vaccinate their child or pull the schedule, if they would be required to then view an educational video. As a pro-choice Democrat, would you then similarly support a video for women who are looking to end their pregnancy to show a video of the
I heard that as pro-choice Democrat, but I support a woman seeking an abortion, and then I support
Representative Beasley, would you like permission to do a check on that? Representative Beasley, please proceed with your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This Senate Bill 163 will require those who choose to not vaccinate their student to view an educational video. And what I'm asking is, for their health choice for their children, as pro-choice Democrat, as you identified yourself, would you support something similar, but as something, a video that would educate a woman on the development of the fetus inside of her prior to her being allowed to abort, to go through an abortion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Beasley, for the question. And I think that goes to the answer I just gave, which is that in that case, it's the woman's own health that's affected. In terms of vaccines, it's affecting an entire population. And that's what the distinguishing factor is here.
Thank you for your answer.
And that might be the best one.
So, are there any additional questions for this panel? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anyone on the panel can answer, and I kind of want to flesh out this discussion about the educational piece. There is a bit of coercion, right? So if someone wants to try and seek the exemption, they are going to be forced to have to participate in some sort of educational, state-approved educational video. And my question is, why is it okay? I mean, I understand that you very well may say, well, here are the benefits if they are educated, but I want to get to the first instance. Why is it appropriate for the government to say, you know what, family, you first have to listen, you first have to watch this? Why is that ever appropriate for the government to mandate that you must be, in essence, re-educated if you don't agree?
Thank you, Representative Williams. Panelists, we're actually 4 seconds out of time, but I'll allow one of you a few seconds to answer. Dr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Representative Williams. I think the difference with Representative Williams is that the often decisions are made without full facts, and one of the things we as medical professionals try to do is ensure you have an informed consent. And the good news is that the video will have both the benefits and the risks. And so that way we're sure that someone truly is making an informed decision.
Thank you both very much. I'd like to ask Emily Wright and Dr. O'Leary to come and please present their testimony. We begin with Ms. Wright. Please introduce yourself, let us know who you represent, and offer your testimony.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Emily Wright and I'm here with Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities. Like 79% of fellow Coloradans, I support SB20-163. I was born and raised right here in Denver, and I'm a single mother. I've raised my thriving, fully vaccinated children who are 13, 17, and 19 all by myself. As you can imagine, that doesn't leave me with a lot of However, the dismal childhood vaccination rates in Colorado are such an important issue to me that I make the time to seek out facts and support legislative action that I believe will be impactful. Today you've heard a lot of feelings. As a mom, an activist, and a compassionate human being, I have a lot of feelings. But your job is not to make policy based on feelings. Your job is to make policy informed by the facts. Opponents are out here drowning out the facts with fallacies. They've created an imaginary version of this bill that allows forced vaccination and compromises the ability to get a legitimate exemption. SB20-163 does not do that. And you, representatives, know that. Here's an actual fact. Everywhere these anti-vax activists go, they target a specific community. And everywhere they go, they leave an outbreak of that vaccine-preventable disease in their wake. When they went to Samoa, the measles outbreak soon followed, infecting over 5,000 and counting 83. When they went to New York and targeted the Orthodox Jewish community, months later, hundreds were infected. The Somali immigrant community in Minnesota, the Russian immigrant community in Washington State, and the Amish community in Ohio. Now they are here in my state, taking advantage of a watershed moment for civil rights. In a few months, schools will be back in session, travel will pick up, and I fear we will see vaccination rates plummet once again with an outbreak here too. Representative Molika is often quoted as saying, it's not if, but when a measles outbreak comes to Colorado. And when that happens, a streamlined and formalized process will expedite help to those who need it most, the unvaccinated. Vote yes on SB20-163 and protect Colorado's children.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Ms. Wright. Dr. O'Leary, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and offer your testimony.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sean O'Leary. I'm a pediatrician and a pediatric infectious disease specialist, and I'm also a parent. I'm here today representing Children's Hospital of Colorado and Colorado chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Colorado has among the lowest vaccination rates in the country. Historically, laws around vaccination have centered on sterile and prevention of simple reasons. Vaccine-preventable diseases spread very easily in schools. We're one of 15 states allows both religious and personal belief exemptions to vaccination for school attendance. Research has shown that the easier it is for a parent to get a non-medical vaccine exemption, the lower the overall vaccination rate and the higher the risk for outbreaks. Currently, Colorado has only for obtaining a non-medical exemption for school entry, resulting in Colorado children suffering from diseases that shouldn't even exist in 2020. What we know is that in states where there's an equal effort law,
To all witnesses, with everything covered, it's difficult to hear, so if you can move closer to the microphone and speak more loudly into the microphone.
Sure, sorry. We are one of 15, So currently Colorado has among the easiest processes for obtaining a non-medical exemption for school entry, resulting in Colorado children suffering from diseases that shouldn't even exist in 2020. What we know is that in states where there's an equal effort law, meaning that parents who choose not to vaccinate their children need to do something similar to the effort required of the majority of parents who vaccinate their children, we see lower exemption rates and higher vaccination rates. Currently in Colorado, we have no equal effort. In this bill, obtaining a non-medical exemption requires either visiting a child's medical provider or taking an online educational module for those parents with difficulty accessing the medical home. We're in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic with a life-threatening infection. The reality for children now is that the diseases prevented by vaccines are much more severe in children than SARS-CoV-2, and most of them spread much more easily in schools. We don't have a vaccine for SARS-CoV-2 yet, but we do have safe and effective vaccines to protect us and our children against many severe diseases. To protect Colorado, we must do everything we can to increase these life-saving vaccines in children, and SB20-163 will help us do that. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Members, any questions for this panel? Representative Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have two questions for Dr. O'Leary. The first question, Dr. O'Leary, we do believe that 163 is going to improve our immunization rates here in Colorado. And then the second question is, from your medical standpoint, do you find anything in this, in Senate Bill 163 that is coercion or that is forcing anyone to do anything?
Yeah, to be clear, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't think that this was going to help. I mean, I spend a lot of my time working to increase vaccination rates both here in Colorado and across the U.S. And what we know is that in states that have laws on the books that are similar, we've seen the rates of vaccinations go up. So yeah, I do believe that this bill, if passed, would have a positive impact on our vaccination rates in Colorado. For your second question in terms of coercion, I think a lot of buzzwords have been thrown around to try and make people feel like this bill is not a good idea. I think coercion is one of them. There's no coercion in this. To be clear, their parents would still be able to get exemptions if they really felt strongly, and they don't have to do this online educational module. They can simply visit the medical provider, which many of these parents already do. I think, as pediatricians, a lot of us take care of families who, want to delay a vaccine or refuse a vaccine here and there, and those people are still going into their doctors, seeing their pediatricians, and so they wouldn't necessarily need to see this online education module. So in answer to your question, no, I don't think there's any level of coercion involved.
Members, Representative Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Either of you on the panel could answer this. This concerns the video and the online education. And it's a question that is, this online education required by the bill, if you want to opt out, how can we be assured, how can we all be assured that this issue will be adequately represented by both sides of this particular issue, the no vaccine and yes vaccine? How can we be assured that it's going to be adequately presented in this online video educational program? Can either of you answer that?
Which of you would like to take this question?
Yeah, I can tackle that. So number one, again, parents are not required to view this video. They can visit a medical provider. So there's no forcing any parents to see the video. They can also see a medical provider if they want to get an exemption. So that's number one. Number two, the bill, I believe, proposes that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment will put together an online education module based on the best available science. So it will present, so if you look at the CDPHE website, I don't, the educational things that are already on there, I see nothing that is controversial or unusual. They put together fact-based, science-based information. So I'm not sure I get the question here in terms of what it is you'd like to see in this video.
Representative Champion, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'm just real concerned. CDPHE doesn't. I don't feel good right now about CDPHE and what they're doing with the coronavirus issues right now. So concerning this particular issue, I'm afraid that online education will be skewed to one side.
About 10 seconds left. Dr. O'Leary.
It's not a political question, it's a scientific question. And so there's no, one side or two sides of science, there's science. And so this will, the video online module will present the science. Thank you.
Thank you both. Now, I'd like to bring up Ms. Diana Herrero and Dr. Eric France. Start with Ms. Herrero. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and offer your testimony.
Hi, my name is Diana Herrero, and I'm the Interim Deputy Director for the Division of Disease Control and Public Health Response.
Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Herrero. Please speak into the microphone.
I know it's
I'm just going to encourage all witnesses to come as close to the microphone as you can and speak loudly.
Okay, right here. All right, thank you. I want to start by talking about a few things the bill does not do. It does not remove the parent's ability to claim exemptions for their child. It does not alter the process we undertake to require vaccines for school entry. We have always sought stakeholder input and taken our recommendations to the Board of Health, and this does not change. It does not remove the parent's It does not remove a parent's ability to opt their child out of SIS. It does not require parents to identify their religious faith nor describe their personal beliefs, and does not allow SIS to store this information. We do not ask for nor have we ever stored this information. It does not violate FERPA. FERPA places restrictions on what identifiable information a school can share and requires parental consent before sharing. This does not change. It also does not violate HIPAA. Under HIPAA, the department is a public health authority, and providers are allowed to share information with us without prior consent, and this does not change. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Colorado Immunization Information System, our state's confidential, population-based, and secure system that collects and consolidates vaccination and exemption data for Coloradans of all ages. SIS is an important tool that supports individual and population health, clinical decision support, outbreak response, and helps guide public health actions with the goals of improving immunization rates, decreasing vaccine-preventable disease, and keeping Coloradans healthy. SIS is not used to harass, bully, intimidate, nor require anyone to be vaccinated. We do not make home visits based off of SIS information or any other information. SIS complies with state and federal security requirements, undergoes annual scans, maintains extensive audit trails, and has multiple access control provisions in place. To date, SIS has never experienced a security breach. SIS records are strictly confidential and may only be shared in certain circumstances as defined by statute, and access is limited to the minimum necessary. The bill does make an important change in relation to SIS. It requires medical providers to share both vaccination and exemption data with SIS, thereby giving public health providers and schools a complete picture of vaccination levels in our state. In general, this bill will improve our ability to use timely, complete, and high-quality data to protect the public's health not only day-to-day, but during vaccine-preventable disease outbreaks.
Ms. Herrera, you're out of time.
And I welcome any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now, Dr. France, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you represent and begin your testimony. Dr. France, I don't think your microphone is on. It's the button at the bottom of the mic. You see the base, and there should be green lights.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. My name is Dr. Eric France. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Colorado Department of Public Health. I've been in Colorado for 30 years, where I've worked on building prevention programs to keep the people of Colorado healthy. I will say that the basis of all work to improve health is really building strong universal registry systems. You need to know where people are at with cancer screening, diabetes, blood pressure control, immunizations, all require appropriate registry systems in order to be successful. I think that this bill will help our immunization registry so we can represent Coloradans. I've been very interested in understanding number of exemption rates in Colorado, but unfortunately don't have much information in our current registry system. I think what we're building here is this bill will help us
extended your time.
I'm also glad that this bill will help families have another option beyond speaking with immunization providers, with online education. I know that if families have the opportunity to review this kind of education program, it could make the conversations and exams go smoother and faster. Finally, after I'm done here, I'll be heading back home to work on COVID, day 94 now, the work of the State Health Department. One of our big concerns is what COVID will look like during the pandemic flu, or the flu, I should say, the season flu this year. My concerns are that we will see a reduction in immunization rates. We've already seen the number of administered vaccines drop by a third in our registry systems over the last 3 months. And the idea of adding a third ball, COVID, flu, and potentially measles or pandemic to our outbreak work this fall can be overwhelming for our folks. My ask is that you support this bill. I tell you that the Department of Public Health and Environment strongly supports this bill and believes this bill will improve our registration. Our registry system will improve our school and family work and our provider work to improve vaccination rates for vaccine-preventable diseases. Thank you.
Dr. Franson, thank you so much. Members, questions for this witness now. Representative Mulligan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being here and the work that you're doing during this difficult time for the state of Colorado. Just 2 quick questions from testimony that we heard earlier. There was testimony that stated that CDPHE sold data from the SIS system for millions and millions of dollars. And then there's also accusations or testimony stating that the SIS database is vulnerable to being hacked or that it's not a secure database to have information in. Can you speak to both of those pieces of testimony that we heard earlier?
So we definitely, this is Diana Herrera, sorry. We definitely do not sell data from the immunization registry. We've never done that. We would never do that. That would be wrong. We would not do that. In terms of security, so we are required to comply with all of the OIT security provisions. We have to have our system behind secure firewalls and on secure servers at the eFort warehouse. And so we work with OIT to make sure, on an ongoing basis, they do vulnerability scans. Our vendor even does vulnerability scans. They look at our code to make sure that there's no vulnerabilities. So we do a lot of work with OIT and with our vendor to make sure that our system remains secure. And again, we've never had a data breach with our system.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to get back to this coercion piece. There seems to be, from the testimony that I'm hearing, sort of a semantics battle that I'm having. So I wanted to get your take on it. There is a requirement that if you want to seek the exemptions, you either have to go see a physician or you have to take the online module. That's a requirement. What that tells me by the word requirement means you have to do it in order to get the exemption. So by definition, you are, not you, but the bill is coercing people, if it were to pass, to actually get an exemption. Is that correct?
Who would like to take this question? Dr. France.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Williams, for the question. There is a requirement in the bill that we visit a physician or immunization provider and speak to them about vaccinations or do an online education module. I actually see that as a positive rather than an example of coercion. I think so much of care providers' times can be spent talking about vaccines that having an opportunity to speak and learn about them before arrival will make my visit more streamlined, more focused on other issues than just vaccines. So from my perspective, having people learn about vaccines, their safety, is an important opportunity. I think the other thing is that our world since the 1990s has changed with the amount of information available through the internet and social media. And as doctors, we are constantly trying to manage rumors and hearsay and untruths that are found. And so in particular, this happens with vaccines. The idea of having an evidence-based education that might answer some of these questions online, that can balance some of the things that people are hearing through the web, I think is a good one.
Thank you. We have 18 seconds left. Can you be fast? Representative Williams.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Why is it okay, even with the so-called disinformation that's out there, why is it okay for this state to say you have to take this education model?
We are over time. Can you answer in 5 seconds?
I think there's a social contract that says that we live in the community and we want to protect our neighbors, we want to protect our healthcare providers, and so we should all learn about vaccines and really understand the truth about their safety and their effectiveness.
Thank you both. Let's bring up Janet Gorkowski and Amber Burkhart. Ms. Gorkowski? Just as a reminder, please introduce yourself, tell us who you're speaking for, and proceed.
Hi, my name is Jana Kragaski, and I represent myself and my family. Today, especially with everything going on, I want to talk about something good for a change. I want to talk about love, and I want to talk about trust. First is love. My little boy is 2.5, and his favorite things are rockets, airplanes, and carrying around a very tall cat. As divided as we are, we all agree on one thing. We love our children. We love them as tiny, precious babies. We love them as toddlers asking questions every 3 seconds. I assume we love them as teenagers, but we'll see. Next is trust. I've had the same doctor since college. She's a family doctor, so she does a little bit of everything. She's removed weird moles. She does my pap smears. She cried with me when I miscarried my first baby. She cared for me through depression when I felt like I was drowning. When I got pregnant again, she helped me heal when I had my son. And then there was Joy. Joy at my son's newborn appointment when he was recovered and healthy. Joy when we finally found the right treatment for my depression. Joy every day my family is healthy. I trust my doctor with my life. Don't trust doctors. And honestly, I cannot blame them. Our medical system is so broken. People feel unseen and unheard. But we cannot live in fear. I don't vaccinate because I'm afraid. I vaccinate because I love my son. I love his friends at daycare and his future friends at school. They deserve to be safe just as much as he does. I'm here today to ask you to love and to ask you to trust so that we can make the world a little bit safer for everyone. I'm asking you to vote yes on SB20-163. Thank you.
Much. Ms. Burkhart, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amber Burkhart, Public Policy Director at the Colorado Hospital Association. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. CHA represents over 100 hospitals and health systems across Colorado, and we are here today in strong support of Senate Bill 163. We thank the bill sponsors for the stakeholder process they have led, striving to balance concerns about parental choice with public health. Senate Bill 163 represents modest but effective legislation that will improve Colorado's vaccination rates by strengthening and standardizing the school immunization exemption process. Given the unprecedented pandemic across the U.S. and globe and the impact that it has had not just on patient safety and public health, but also on healthcare costs, it is paramount time to recognize the importance of vaccines in our healthcare system. Vaccines are safe, cost-effective, and evidence-based way to prevent disease in our communities. Vaccines have also made a substantial contribution to the sustainability of healthcare systems by reducing the burden of frequent infectious diseases and associated resource use. The use of vaccines to prevent diseases results in fewer medical visits, diagnostic tests, treatments, and hospitalizations, which leads to substantial savings in our healthcare system each year. In Colorado, vaccine-preventable diseases caused over 10,000 hospitalizations in emergency departments visits for Colorado children alone in 2018 and results in over $59 million in healthcare charges. The 4 major vaccine-preventable diseases cost the U.S. $2.5 billion a year. And over the last 20 years, the CDC estimates vaccinations save nearly $295 billion in direct costs and $1.38 trillion in total costs to society. Improving vaccination rates provide important health protections for individuals and communities and protects important health system resources for when we need them the most. Thank you. I urge a yes today.
Thank you so much. Members, questions for these witnesses? Thank you both so much for your time. So we'll have Dr. Stephanie James and Dr. Aaron Schapp. Let's start with Dr. Schapp. Dr. James.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Stephanie James, and I'm a parent scientist. That is, I'm an associate professor of pharmaceutical sciences at the Regis University School of Pharmacy, our region's only Jesuit Catholic university, where I teach the immunology, infectious disease, and vaccine units. I'm also a parent of 2 school-aged children and a member of Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities. As an educator, I care deeply that all individuals receive quality education. As a scientist, I'm passionate that they receive quality scientific education. While opponents of this bill may testify that their children have been injured by immunization and you should have compassion and empathy for them, the scientific evidence is clear that vaccines are safe and the best way to prevent several infectious diseases. And while this bill certainly aims to improve our immunization rates, most Colorado voters favor improving vaccine policy, parents still retain the right not to vaccinate their child. Vaccines are designed not only to protect oneself, but also our neighbors, and especially those most vulnerable. And if our vaccine rates are low enough, disease spreads more easily through a school or community, which poses a threat to individuals that may not be able to be vaccinated. Many believe vaccination is a personal right. As this is traditionally a day of worship, and I'm an unashamed Christian, I look to biblical teaching regarding this area. And I find in Matthew 22, verses 37 through 40, where they're talking about the first commandment, which is to love the Lord. It then goes on to say, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Not check your own personal rights and then check in on your neighbor. And I'm a firm believer in the separation of church and state, and I certainly don't want the government in my business more than necessary. And Christian morals aside, using parental rights as a cover for a choice that might cause harm to public health and our neighbors, I believe is bad policy, as is using poorly designed studies to suggest that African Americans are at a greater risk from vaccines. As a scientist, educator, and importantly as a parent, I support this bill because it aims to increase getting accurate education to parents from experts and improving our state's immunization rate while retaining the right to opt out. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Dr. Schapp, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dr. Aaron Schapp, and I am a member of the Colorado Academy of Family Physicians. I'm also a practicing family physician in Westminster, Colorado, and I've come here today in strong support of Senate Bill 163, as you've probably heard echoed before by many other physicians here, that believe vaccines are a very, very important aspect of public health and very important to protect our patients and our communities. And a couple of things I heard in earlier testimony, I want to make sure that I address that as a former student of the University of Colorado School of Medicine, absolutely taught about vaccines and the immunologic response and much of the evidence-based data around vaccinating. And I also work as volunteer faculty for the University of Colorado School of Medicine now, and I do teach family medicine residents and students of medical school and pharmacy school, and that is something that we absolutely take a lot of time to teach. Another important aspect I heard earlier about the aspect of coercion here. What's something that's very important to me as a family physician is that with all my patients, I treat families, but my individual pediatric patients, I must advocate for them as well. And it's very important to me that I'm able to provide evidence-based information for them to make informed consent with their families. So being able to have that information is very, very important. And the decision not to provide potentially life-saving treatment is something that is very important in making that shared decision with the families. And for someone that opts not to do that, it's certainly having an option of getting that information elsewhere, I think, is a reasonable factor here. And I didn't want to take too much more time, so I think I'm running out here.
Yes, thank you so
Thank you
much.
again, and I urge you all to vote yes in favor of Senate Bill 163.
Witnesses, members, questions. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Dr. James, right? I have two questions, actually. First off, you invoked the Bible, so and you quoted Matthew, I believe. You weren't suggesting that those who don't vaccinate or choose to opt out are not loving their neighbors.
Dr. James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, of course not. But when I think about this issue of personal rights and the health of the public good, for me personally, I turn to the biblical teachings. And for me, what I find in the Bible is that the Lord wants us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And to me, that means that you do things that protect your neighbors. And in this case, that would be maintaining a well-immunized community so that diseases do not spread to those that cannot be immunized or perhaps have a compromised immune system due to chemotherapy or HIV status or age.
Representative Hawkins-Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Dr. James. Thank you for being here, and I'm glad that you are helping educate our future pharmacists of America. I appreciate that as a pharmacist. Pharmacists are frontline healthcare workers. We see folks all the time because they come into the drugstores, they come in to get their medications on a monthly basis, even more than that. We heard earlier today that there was a statewide survey that said 88% of Coloradans supported vaccinations and would support a bill like this. Do you hear similar, since since pharmacists are out in the community, do you hear the same? Do you hear pushback from parents? Just tell us a little bit about what you hear.
Dr. James.
Thank you for the question. I actually would suggest you direct that question to two student pharmacists that are going to come and testify later, as they are actually working in community pharmacy and can testify to that better than myself.
Committee members, additional. Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Dr. Shelf, I think, would you sign an exemption form for one of your patients who opted to not vaccinate their child?
Absolutely, and I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that does require a little follow-up there, and that's something very common, that working with a family to be able to understand their health and their children's health is very important, and I think the inability of a physician to agree to do that under any circumstances does potentially cause harm to that patient and physician relationship. And so we do have many families that, for whatever reason, choose not to vaccinate their children, and it's important that we can provide them, appropriate information, and if they do have strong health beliefs, that they're not alienated, from our practice and from care for that. And so that is something that I do believe that many of my colleagues would also feel the same.
Great. Members, additional questions. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is for anyone on the panel here. In prior testimony from the opponents, and certainly working on this issue over the past year or so, there have been people who choose not to vaccinate, or those who have vaccinated but they've suffered an injury, have indicated that there are families that find it a very difficult prospect to actually get a medical exemption can any of you speak as to why it can be difficult to get a medical exemption?
Which witness would like to take this? Dr. Shaw?
Madam Chair, I guess I'm going to understand this question. Why would it be difficult to get a medical exemption?
And Dr. Shep, we are over time, but if you can give a brief answer, that would be great.
Again, I wouldn't know a specific reason why it would be difficult. I think it's important to distinguish between a medical exemption and a non-medical one, perhaps. But if it's something that maybe a deeply held belief that might not be scientifically feasible, then it may be something in the realm of non-medical. But the distinction, I think, here is cleared by the fact that they can get an exemption. It doesn't really need to be distinguished at the end.
Thank you to both of these witnesses. Our time is done, but we appreciate you. Thank you. Next, I'd like to have Dr. Lisa Whitesides. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll first call Colleen Casper and Alicia Hine. City members, I just wanted to let you know we've got 28 minutes left, just giving everyone a heads up on that. We'll begin with Colleen Casper. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Good afternoon, committee, and thank you for being here today to hear this important bill. I'm Colleen Casper, Executive Director of the Colorado Nurses Association. The Colorado Nurses Association strongly supports Senate Bill 20-163 and requests a yes vote from each of you today. Lillian Wald was the nation's first recognized public health nurse when in 1893 she established the Henry Street Settlement in the Lower East Side of Manhattan to serve young mothers and their children in the prevention of spread of communicable disease. She recognized the vital relationship between economics, environment, personal conduct, and health practices of individuals. Fast forward from the early 1900s to today, 2020, and we sit in this room contemplating best practices for disease prevention and the current high cost of social and economic costs of not being able to do so. Today, you have an opportunity to be part of minimizing the impact of communicable diseases. You have the opportunity to provide leadership in Colorado by authorizing the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to more accurately track immunization rates in Colorado schools. Please vote yes today on Senate Bill 163 in support of a healthier Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Hine, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Thank you. Ooh, that was loud. Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Hine, and I'm here as a pro-vaccine parent with Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities. I was born and raised in Boulder, and I'm now raising my 2 fully vaccinated children in the town. And I work in maternal and child health, and I have a public health background. Those opposed to this bill will do anything to sway you to their side. They were outside this room just a minute ago trying to derail the legislative process. They prey on and attack moms who lost babies to SIDS and mislead them to think that the cause was actually vaccines. They give bad medical advice on social media. For example, when they told a Colorado mom not to give her child Tamiflu as prescribed by their doctor, when her child died, they turned their backs on this poor mom and deleted the evidence of their faulty advice. They shame children and adults with autism and say it's better to have no kids at all than to have a vaccine-damaged child, despite decades of scientific evidence showing zero correlation between the two. They co-opted the tagline, "Believe women," in light of the Me Too movement, with their misguided phrase, "Believe mothers." How about we believe doctors and public health professionals? The current spotlight on our country's centuries-long institutional racism is important. People of color have long experienced inequality in their healthcare access, treatment, and outcomes. The opponent's recent co-opting of the Black Lives Matter movement is incredibly hypocritical because those who choose not to vaccinate have higher incomes than average and are more likely to be white. This choice not to vaccinate means communities of color and low-income communities are carrying a disproportionate burden to achieve herd immunity. The current exemption process in Colorado makes it easier for a small group of parents to practice their beliefs than it is for the majority of parents to follow the recommended vaccine and can grow up in healthy communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions for this witness panel? Seeing none, thank you both so much for coming out today. Next, we'll bring up Colleen Casper and Alicia Hine, or that's who we just heard from. Apologies. Let's go with Dr. Whitesides and Catherine Pensko. Dr. Whitesides, we'll have you start first.
Sure. Thanks. Good afternoon. Thank you to members of the committee. My name is Lisa Whitesides, and I'm a primary care pediatrician, the mother of 2 teens, and I'm here as a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I have been practicing in Denver for almost 20 years. My office is in the eastern edge of Denver, and it's a wonderful mix of families from very diverse backgrounds. And what I can tell you is that the majority of these families, the overwhelming majority, support vaccinations and follow the recommended immunization schedule, despite what you're hearing outside and in the halls. Parents want to keep their children safe. They want to make sure they're protected against vaccine-preventable diseases, and they want to make sure that their schools are safe spaces where their kids can learn without the risk of becoming ill. Also, like all pediatricians, I do care for children with very serious illnesses like cancer and other immunodeficiencies. And these kids can't get their required vaccines, and they're much more susceptible to serious illness in the event of an outbreak. These children should not have to risk a serious illness by going to school and potentially being exposed to someone with a vaccine-preventable disease. Despite all these reasons to vaccinate, there are families in my practice who choose not to vaccinate their children or not fully immunize. And I continue to care for these families. I view my role as their pediatrician as the person who can give them the most up-to-date medical information so that they can make the best healthcare decisions for their child. Given that we are in the midst of a global pandemic for which we have no vaccine, I think we need to do all that we can to increase the immunization rates for those vaccine-preventable diseases for which we have vaccines and can prevent. This bill is common sense legislation, which I believe would improve the health of Colorado's kids and the communities that they live in, and I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Members, do we have any questions for this witness panel? Oh, forgive me. I was ready to go to questions. Ms. Penskover.
No worries. Hi, my name is Catherine Penskover, and I'm a member of the Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities, and I'm asking you to vote yes on Senate Bill 163. I'm a mom of 2 fully vaccinated children, aged 9 and 12, maybe younger. I deeply care about good vaccination policy, partially because my son is medically compromised from a congenital heart defect. I feel strongly that we live in a society, and by choosing to live in a society, we agree to protect not only our children, but the others around us. The reality is that when there's a pocket of unvaccinated people, it opens up all of us to succumbing to preventable diseases. Kids like mine who do not have the luxury of perfect health have to trust others around will help him stay healthy. There's a lot of misinformation surrounding vaccines and this bill in an effort to stoke fear. There are decades of research on vaccine safety and efficacy, and millions have been saved by vaccines. The reality is that this bill is extremely reasonable and still allows for exemptions, medically and otherwise. Please do not be fooled by the extremely vocal, as we've heard, minority. The majority of Colorado parents agree with me, and this vote aligns with science to protect the health of everyone around us.
Perfect timing. Thank you both so much. Okay, now we'll look for questions. Members, do we have any questions for this panel? Seeing none, you got off lucky. Thank you both so much. Appreciate your time. Let's bring Sarah Wu and Lexi Finkenshire. Botching anybody's names. Let's begin with Sarah Wu. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed with your 2-minute testimony.
Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sarah Wu. I'm from Castle Rock, and I'm also a member of Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities. I'm a mother of 2 children, aged 7 years and 9 months. I'm asking you on behalf of the 79% of Coloradans that support this bill to vote yes on SB20-163. I moved from Oklahoma to Colorado 2 years ago to provide a better life for my children. We moved less than a week before school started, so getting my older son enrolled in kindergarten was very stressful. I was shocked to find out that I had to provide 2 bills in my correct name with my new address, but his immunization records were essentially optional. There was a very simple form I could have signed instead, even shorter than the form in Oklahoma. Does Colorado really consider it so much worse for a student to enroll in the wrong school district than to contract and potentially spread vaccine-preventable illnesses? In my particular case, I did provide my son's immunization records, and I got several incorrect notices about my son being behind on vaccines. It took several trips to the school to straighten things out. When I complained to a fellow mom, she asked me why I didn't just sign the opt-out form. She told me she stays up to date with vaccinations, but the form doesn't require you to give any reasoning for why you weren't going to provide records. And other parents used it to avoid dealing with hassles just like this. I felt like I was being punished for trying to be compliant with vaccination recommendations. Even though I fully vaccinate my children, what reason do I have to actually provide the documentation to my children's school if the opt-out process is so much easier? SB20-163 still allows parents with any sort of objection to not vaccinate their child. This bill simply raises the level of effort required to opt out to a more reasonable level, which, by the way, is still less than what Oklahoma requires, and that's pretty low. It encourages parents who are on the fence about vaccinations or providing vaccination records to the school to go through with the right thing. As a state, we should be as concerned with the health of our children as we are with where they live. We should expect the same level of effort from parents in documenting their children's immunizations as we already expect them in documenting their address. Please vote yes on SB20-163 to help increase vaccination and documentation rates in our states and protect our children. Thank you for hearing my testimony today. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great job. Thank you. Ms. Finkenshire, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So my name is Lexi Finkenshire. I represent myself and my family. I'm a mother to 2 children. My son Isaac is 12 years old and my daughter Madeline is 9 years old. My husband Mike is a physician at Good Samaritan Medical Center. I'm also a teacher. I just completed my 4th year of teaching. My students range in age from 3 years old to middle schoolers. I'm a member of Colorado Parents for Vaccinated Communities. I have a master's degree in public health and worked in mental health research for 10 years at the Anschutz Medical Campus before becoming a teacher. Today, I'm asking you to support Senate Bill 163. As a teacher, it is our responsibility to ensure a safe and supportive learning environment for our students. When vaccination rates drop, we are less able to create that safe learning environment. I worry for our immune-compromised students and for our students with immune-compromised family members. Concern of contracting a vaccine-preventable disease should not be a reason for students to miss school. Over the years, I've found that teachers tend less to think in terms of me and mine and more along the line of ours. It is a privilege to get to work with children every day, to observe their growth, their trials and tribulations, and to help support them. It is our responsibility to provide that safe and supportive learning environment. Colorado currently has the lowest vaccination rate among kindergartners. We are doing a disservice to our students in failing to provide them with a safe learning environment. Respectfully, I would ask for you to support this legislation, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. I also wanted to thank you for holding this session today. I appreciate the time you are taking for this bill. Had it been during a typical school year, I would have not been able to testify due to my class schedule. I am very appreciative of having the opportunity to speak with you all today. Thank you.
Good timing. Members, do we have questions for these witnesses? Seeing none, thank you both so very much. We appreciate your time. Let's now bring Dr. Josh Williams and Ms. Michelle Ames. So we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, representatives. I'm a general pediatrician at Denver Health. I'm a parent
and I'm a person of faith, and I've spent the last 5 years of my career investigating the intersection of religion and vaccination. I've surveyed over 100 clergy here in Denver. I've interviewed over a dozen religious leaders across our state and more in North Carolina, and I've hosted listening circles with nearly 100 religious Coloradans at churches, synagogues, and spiritual centers. My findings are simple. Major religions support vaccination, and the vast majority of religious leaders and their congregants do too. They don't just see vaccination as a way to protect themselves or their children from pertussis or measles. They see vaccination through the lens of sacred texts that command them to consider others better than themselves and protect the elderly and vulnerable. As one pastor I interviewed said, love your neighbor as yourself. Vaccines help the general population stay immune. And I think that's a key verse. Today, I exhort you to vote in favor of SB20-163. By doing so, you will enact a policy that promotes public health and aligns with the desires of the vast majority of religious leaders and congregants across our state. The support of the Interfaith Alliance of Colorado for this bill is proof of this point. And for the few religious faithful who oppose vaccination, SB20-163 still allows non-medical exemptions after an online course or an in-person discussion. It is exactly the kind of respectful compromise that dozens of clergy I've spoken with endorse. One said, I believe in having a religious exemption for required vaccinations, but I believe it should be a high bar, not just check a box and not do it. SB20-163 is the high bar Colorado needs that balances individual beliefs with our communal responsibility to care for one another, and I exhort you to vote in favor of it today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Ames, please introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michelle Ames, and I'm here today to represent Colorado Vaccinates, which is a coalition of groups who have come together in support of Senate Bill 163. I'm also here today on behalf of my two children, Krista and Harper, who are 6 and 9. I'd like to note for you that the members signing this letter that I'm about to read to you, some of whom have representatives here today, also support of Senate Bill 163 concerning the modernization of the school entry immunization process, and urge you to vote yes on Senate Bill 163. In typical circumstances, representatives of the below-signed organizations would have made every effort to attend the House hearing on this bill to offer our testimony. Given our current public health crisis, please accept this letter of support for Senate Bill 163 in lieu of some of that testimony. It could not be more clear now during our current national health emergency that vaccines save lives, protect health, and help ensure the viability and vitality of our economy. Senate Bill 163 proposes common sense policy changes to vaccine requirements for school enrollment that will help improve vaccination rates and protect Colorado communities while still preserving parental choice for those families who opt out. Further, it strengthens Colorado's immunization information infrastructure so that our public health agencies are better prepared to respond to crises like the one we are facing today. Colorado simply cannot afford to experience a vaccine-preventable disease outbreak on top of dealing with the ongoing impacts of the pandemic, especially as we anticipate another wave of COVID cases as Colorado begins to reopen businesses and move into the fall and winter seasons. Passing Senate Bill 163 is a concrete, low-cost step toward protecting public health and safety and preserving capacity in our healthcare system for dealing with COVID. Coloradans know that vaccinations are effective and save lives.
Thank you, Ms. Ames. I'm so sorry. Your time is up. Members, are there any questions? Representative Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Doctor, what you said concerned me greatly, and let me explain what I heard is that you went out and interviewed many religious leaders, and that they said that it needs to be a high bar for a religious exemption. Now, who is going to make that determination is just one of the big questions that I have that concerned me greatly. And if that is part of the reason that someone is going to determine whether or not they are appropriately religious just to get an exemption, then that is Big Brother stuff that George Orwell wrote about in 1984.
Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for that question. The leader I spoke with was speaking about all non-medical exceptions, and SB20-163 doesn't ask someone to clarify their religious position as per why they would oppose vaccination on religious grounds. When I asked religious leaders about how to balance policy in a way that would make sense to them, several of them, unprompted, provided me with the concept of beloved community. Beloved community being through disagreement, dialogue, and nonviolence. And if we think about love and justice applied to this bill, if we only seek love and we allow exemptions without scrutiny, then we minimize the risk of vaccine-preventable diseases and their severity for vulnerable populations. If we pursue justice alone and we forcefully eliminate all non-medical exemptions, then we're creating bitterness in the vanquished and we're creating brutality in the destroyers. So as we pursue a middle ground with love and justice, the kind of balance that SB20-163 strikes, we hope we can move forward through dialogue into a place of nonviolence.
Members of follow-up, Representative Champion.
I'm still very concerned about the bar that is set for a religious exemption in your testimony, because I don't know who makes that determination, and I haven't heard. I respectfully disagree with your proposal, because I just don't know who's going to determine whether you are religious enough to be granted.
Thank you, Representative, for that question. There's no requirement to clarify your religious affiliation in this bill. Thank you.
Representatives, any additional questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you both so much. We have time for two more, and then our time is just about up. I'd like to ask if he's still here, Dr. David Keller and Elizabeth Sabo. Are either of you still in? Oh, great. These will be our last two witnesses. And proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify in support of Senate Bill 163. My name is David Keller. I'm a pediatrician here on behalf of Children's Hospital of Colorado and the evidence-based guidelines tell us that many vaccines must be given several times over a period of time to ensure that a child is fully immune to vaccine-preventable diseases. Staying on schedule is critical to ensuring maximal protection, especially in the first 2 years of life. In my practice, we discuss the recommended vaccines with families when they come in for well-child checks. Parents often ask about vaccine safety and the vaccine schedule. We routinely discuss the benefits and risks of vaccines, along with the importance of that schedule in ensuring that their child is safe within the larger community. I can empathize with the challenge parents face in finding accessible, medically accurate health information about their child's health. Over my 37 years of practice, I've seen several vaccine-preventable diseases practically disappear. Parents often find that perspective useful in considering what they should do for their child. Immunizations are even more important in this time of pandemic. We don't want to have to cope with a second epidemic while we're working to get COVID-19 under control. Yet we know our statewide immunization rate already is the lowest in the country, dropped by about 40% as we implemented the pandemic response across the state. As we reopen Colorado, pediatricians are working hard to ensure that we fill that gap and prevent a secondary outbreak of infant health. Senate Bill 163 Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Sabo, please proceed. Introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and offer your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Elizabeth Sabo. I'm here on behalf of myself and my family. I will start with a quote. The article says that they are afraid of unvaccinated crowds for the bill. Maybe out of 2 minutes for each testimony, each of us should take the first minute to fake cough our brains out. LOL. If you haven't guessed yet, this is a quote from one of the individuals on the opposing side who is mocking this pandemic and the fact that people can die from COVID-19. Does this sound like someone who cares about others and the safety of others? I don't think so. These words are cruel and mean. We heard today from an attorney opposed to the bill. I too am an attorney. I remember during my first year of law school learning about the reasonable person standard. Reasonable people don't believe in pseudoscience. Reasonable people know that vaccines are safe and effective. Reasonable people don't believe that the government will implant microchips in us so that we can be traced by Bill Gates and the government. Moreover, reasonable people know that the federal government would not be able to coordinate something like this without it becoming a giant disaster. Reasonable people believe doctors and scientists, not TV producers and outright supporters. Some who spoke on the Capitol steps this morning after being invited by this local movement. I do not want to have the citizens of the state of Colorado harmed. For me, the answer to protect each other is easy. Please support this reasonable common sense legislation, which would allow for medical and personal belief exemptions and allow for improved vaccination rates. I will use the remainder of my time to speak regarding my friend Kate, who was not able to testify here because her 9-year-old daughter Tegan has an autoimmune kidney disease and was not able to receive the critical MMR booster.
And Ms. Sabo, you have 10 seconds.
Yes, they have. She just wants to say she did not have a choice and they've been quarantined for 90 days and that she has to do that to protect her daughter and would like people to immunize to protect her.
Thank you both. Questions for these witnesses. Representative Malika.
Madam Chair, Dr. Keller, can you, with your experience and being a doctor for a number of years, speak to the risk that our community is at with the rates that we're at with our MMR vaccinations?
I think you've heard some of that already from my colleague, Dr. Cataldi, but I'll reiterate what she said. Of all the diseases, we immunize against a number of different illnesses, and each one has different risks attached to it. Some of these bacteria basically still live among us. Whooping cough bacteria is always out there, so if our rate of whooping cough immunization drops enough, we'll see whooping cough. It just happens. Similarly, H-flu meningitis and pneumococcus are always out there. If we don't immunize, we'll start seeing those things again. Those are the two diseases I watched disappear from the beginning of my career to the present time. Measles, I've seen once in my career. It's a very scary disease. It's very severe and extremely contagious in a manner that pretty much nothing else we have is like that. It exists in the world. If our rates drop and given travel that happens nowadays, we will see it again. And I worry for Colorado that there are places in Colorado where the vaccination rate is low enough that we will see measles. So I think that risk is real.
Members, any additional questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, my question's for Elizabeth. I didn't catch the last name. But I wanted to just simply ask, are you, through your testimony, were you suggesting that anyone who seeks exemptions from vaccinations are somehow unreasonable?
Ms. Sabo.
At this time, thank you for Representative Williams. At this time, under this bill, those exemptions would not be unreasonable, and I just spoke to the standard that we learned in law.
Representatives, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you both so much for your time. I think we're done now with witness testimony, and witness testimony phase is now closed.
wrap up your bill. Representative Roberts, did you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, thank you to everybody who showed up to testify on both sides of this issue. Of course, this one is a bill full of problems. Work on this and for allowing me to join him on it. I think we have a really reasonable bill in front of us. It certainly doesn't go as far as a lot of other states do, but I do think it makes important progress for our state to help information get out there about vaccines and to allow for a process in our state where more children can have access to vaccinations, but also preserves the protection that parents have to make a choice for their child. It does not remove any exceptions. It does not create any mandates. I just think it is a very reasonable way forward for our state, given these current times, but also before these current times. So thank you, Representative Alka, for your work on this, and for everybody who came to testify, and ask for your support.
Representative Malika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to you, Madam Chair, to the committee for being here today, to Representative Roberts for being with me on this important bill. We've heard powerful testimony today. We've heard from public health experts about the benefits this bill will bring to the people of Colorado. We've heard about the risks that our MMR vaccination rates pose to our state. We've heard from medical doctors that they do not see any coercion in this bill. We've heard from the CDPHE about the work they put in to ensure the security of the information being stored. We've heard that they do not sell any of that data. Members, I understand this is a passionate topic on both sides of this issue, but the science around this issue is evidence-based, and that is what we are relying on. We've consulted experts in drafting this bill, experts who have spent their lives on this issue. We have also met with opponents, and that is reflected in the bill. We have kept exemptions in place. We have expanded those who can sign a non-medical exemption and offered another option outside of completing the form to exempt your child from immunizations. The fact is that the status quo has gotten us to where we are today, which is last in the country. Something has to change. As I've said before, other states have taken more drastic steps, eliminating non-medical exemptions altogether. And you know what? Data has shown an increase in immunization rates for those states. But instead here in Colorado, we are taking a more moderate approach, an approach other states like Utah and Oregon have taken. We did this because we heard concern that people still wanted their non-medical exemptions. They have it in this bill. Members, science matters and our community safety matters. And for that reason, I ask you to vote yes on Senate Bill 163.
Representative Malika, would you like to move the bill?
Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 163 to the Appropriations Committee with a favorable recommendation. Second.
Representative Roberts. Members, this is the time where we usually take some remarks from members of the committee before we vote. And before we start that, I just want to remind members that I have asked that we keep our remarks to 5 minutes or less. So feel free to not say anything and just vote. Having said that, would anyone like to have any closing remarks? Representative Champion, I am turning the timer on. Go, sir.
You won't need to. I believe in choice. And I don't believe that the data that would be garnered from this bill would be safe. We've seen that happen time and time again. I was vaccinated. My sister was vaccinated. All of our children, all 3 of our children were all vaccinated. I believe in vaccination, but I believe that the state shouldn't tell you that you must be vaccinated. Therefore, I will be a no vote. And I thank the bill sponsors for bringing it. And I thank all the people that have come and testified to this bill, both on the positive and the negative. But I do not agree that this is a good bill. So I will be a no vote.
Representative Valdez.
I will not need the 5 minutes either, but I just want to thank the sponsors for bringing this bill forward. I know the intentions of this bill are great, because I know how much Representative Malika and Representative Roberts care about the people. I think what came to mind when I heard the statistics when we started the hearing was that we're near last in vaccination rates. As somebody who was born and raised in Colorado, I'm getting kind of tired of being near last in a lot of different things: education, vaccination rates, all these things. I asked a couple of questions during this hearing about whether this requires vaccination. I feel like there's a real disconnect there. It doesn't. And so what this does is it just requires parents to understand the ramifications of not being vaccinated. For that reason, I think we're taking a small step towards ensuring public health, one that I appreciate as somebody who is a member of the public. And I'd just like to thank all of the people who testified for making their feelings heard today. I'll be an enthusiastic yes on this bill and hopes that it will help us to get to a better place as a state, and that our children will be healthier because of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Valdez. Representative Hawkins. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the sponsors for bringing this. I was on the Board of Health for Boulder County for 7 years, and they asked us to do more about what was happening in the schools. We had 6 elementary schools in Boulder that had under a 50% immunization rate. That is ridiculous. If we can't pass a vaccine bill during a viral pandemic, when can we? So as a legislator, I believe in the necessity of vaccines, but as a licensed pharmacist and healthcare professional, simply put, it's not the vaccines that save lives. It's the vaccinations. We're last in the country. We must do more. In Colorado, we've heard most parents do vaccinate their children. Most parents support vaccinations. Most parents support this bill. I look forward to the day when we have a COVID-19 vaccine, because as a pharmacist, I want to try to make that as accessible as possible. This bill will help accessibility for vaccinations. It will help us raise our rates, and I really support this bill as from the bottom of my heart. So I will be a very, very committed yes. Representative Kipp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to thank everybody who took the time to come testify today, and I want to thank the sponsors for the bill. If you are out there listening and you weren't able to come in today, at least I always read all of my emails. You have been heard, because you don't have to be here at the Capitol to be heard. I guess I wanted to talk just a little bit about what's going on today, because what I have seen today is kind of this hearing imitating life, and I think it's kind of ironic, right? We have people who have very closely held beliefs, and everybody has their beliefs, but we also have a lot of science and facts. And we have people in the first group who, if you were not here and didn't see it visually, but most of the people who came to testify against the bill didn't wear masks. The people who are here now and are proponents of the bill are wearing masks. I sat here and listened to every single opponent and proponent very respectfully. I've taken notes, and I found that when we got to the proponents, that we had the opponents trying to drown out their voices. And I really think that, as I said, I think it imitates what's going on in this whole thing. We have people with their beliefs that are trying to drown out facts, and it seems to be where we are in the world today. And I guess that's really all I wanted to say. I do stand with the members of my community who asked me to stand with science and facts and vote yes on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Kipp. Representative Berg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the bill sponsors for bringing this bill. I think it takes a lot of courage in light of all that we've seen today to stand up for science. And I just want to preface my comments by saying I'm going to be a yes for this bill. I, as a legislator, have a responsibility to stand up for science and facts. And in my role, to use my best judgment to listen to those who are schooled and studied in the science and in the facts behind immunizations, vaccinations, pediatric health, and public health. So something else I wanted to bring up, because there wasn't enough discussion about the actual contents of the bill. A lot of people wanted to talk about what they thought was in the bill, but for anybody listening, I would really urge you to go back and look at the bill. So there are actually 3 different ways to be exempted. There are multiple times people kept focusing on one specific way where it would just be so onerous that you would have to be exempted only this way. Well, that's just factually incorrect. Look at the bill. Number 1, you can get a certificate of medical exemption, so nothing's been changed there. If you think that your doctor thinks you can be vaccine injured, that exemption and that choice remains. Number 2, you can get a certificate of non-medical exemption that honors both your religious or your personal beliefs, and it keeps the state out of your business as to your reason for why you wanted to get the exemption, which a lot of people don't like big government knowing. And we heard a lot of people complaining or being very concerned about tracking data. Well, now we don't even know why. That's even less reason to target you. You don't even have to say why you have chosen to be exempted. So that's still there. Nobody has taken that away from you. Additionally, you can, if you don't want to do either of those 2, you can get a certificate of online education module of completion. And if you don't like that, then go get the certificate of non-medical exemption. Then additionally, there was a lot of concern expressed about the database and security of data and tracking. So again, to anybody listening, I urge you to look at the bill. Let's stay with facts. Let's stay with what's actually in the bill. And if you look, you will see that people who take exemptions have the right or the option to exclude their students' exemption data from the immunization tracking system. So you can do that. So please, if we're going to debate bills, let's stick with the facts. I respect people who have concerns. They want to do the very best for their children, and I pass no judgment on parents who really firmly believe that this isn't the path for them. And this bill honors that. This is a reasonable path. It gives our state the opportunity to honor the science, the medical data, and the facts, make good decisions for your kids. And if it's not for you, the bill respects you as well and does it in a fair fashion. So thank you for bringing the bill again. This is good policy for our state, and I am a yes vote.
Thank you, Representative Byrd. Are there other? Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a few comments about 163. For one, no scientist ever says the science is settled. That's not a scientist. And we heard that at least implied quite a bit today. The science is settled and you guys should comply. The reality is this is a coercive bill, otherwise it would not exist. And in order to demonstrate that, let me offer this. If the folks that are protesting outside were instead in control of the majority, and they decided that in order to obtain a vaccination, parents must first get a medical permission certification or non-medical certification permission, or go review the movie Vax before being allowed to get a vaccination. If that was an assertion, then I think you would find that, wow, this is awfully coercive. You need the government's permission to choose the path for your medical practice for your child. It's absolutely coercive. It's even challenging to the state constitution. I have in front of me Colorado State Constitution, and we all swore to uphold on the opening day, and it guarantees all residents of the state between the ages of 6 and 21 to be educated gratuitously. The underlying statute for 163 plus 163 on top of it flies in the face of this public education guarantee for all students. It says you can have this education provided you complied with this coercion, provided that you either vaccinate your child or you jump through these hoops in order to exempt yourself from that. You can only imagine religiously or any other qualification that one might want to put on this Colorado state constitutional right that every child has in the state of Colorado. Or pick any other state constitutional right and then start putting conditions on that. We need you to jump through these hoops in order to enjoy your constitutional right. That's where I have the greatest problem, my greatest challenge in accepting this bill is that it is an assertion of a belief about science that may be true, may be not true. We heard awfully powerful testimony initially here today that challenges that scientific belief. And I think it is an error for us to ever say this science is settled. There was some testimony today giving some examples of mistakes that have been made. I could go on for hours about scientific beliefs that have been corrected by science, by the scientific method over the past many years. I've made my living as an aerospace engineer, hung out with an awful lot of scientists who study the stars and try to figure out how do we travel through space. So I don't claim myself to be a scientist, but I sure hung around a lot of them, and none of them would say, well, we got it all figured out, so let's not consider any alternatives. This is saying, we've got it all figured out, let's quell the alternatives and ensure that everyone complies with what our current state of belief is. That's a large error for any one of us to make, and to use the force of government to assert a particular belief that cannot be settled. And if it were, there would not have been such objections showing up, flying in from around the country. There are people certainly that spend their lives.
30 seconds, Representative Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There have certainly been, as Representative Mullica pointed out, people who spent their lives studying this and concluding that vaccinations are safe and sound. And then there have also been people like Robert Kennedy who have also spent the last 15 years of his life and had an opposite conclusion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any other, Representative Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, there's a lot to say, and very little time to try and put it in. I think to a perspective that would clearly convey, what I'm thinking, and I think at least what some of the other committee members are thinking. So I won't try. But I did want to touch on a few things. First off, I take exception to anyone on this committee somehow implying or outright saying that the opponents of this bill are somehow not sophisticated enough, they don't understand science, or they don't believe science, or because they don't wear masks, that they're somehow harming or endangering others.
Representative Williams, let's not impugn the motives of other members of this committee. If you'd like to say sort of what your beliefs on the bill is, then let's keep it to the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will say whatever I deem will please at this point. Other members have had that right. No
other member has impugned the motive of other members. All I ask is that you not call other people names. That's all. So please state what you have to say.
Well, here's the point. Here's the point. The reason you saw the kind of behavior that you saw outside of that committee room was because of how this process was set up. There was significant limits on this committee hearing. Only giving 2 minutes per testifier and 4 minutes per questioning with the panel is not enough time, especially given the controversial nature of this topic. And additionally, scheduling it on a Sunday, I think further compounded the issue here. And so these people weren't drowning out others who wanted to make some sort of claim. They were crying out because they themselves could not speak, not all of them anyway. And I think that's the problem that we're seeing here. And for anyone to suggest that they don't like science or that they don't care about others is inappropriate, and that's why I'm making this statement. And I'm sorry, this is what has been said on this committee. So yeah, okay, the rules state we're not going to impugn other motives of other committee members, but we're going to allow committee members to impugn the character of witnesses. That's a double standard, and I'm certainly not going to stand for it. I mean, here's to the bill itself. Yeah, this is a mandate. To say there is no mandate is not being honest. There is a coercive nature to this. The stated goal, whether or not it might be well rooted, still doesn't get away from the point that when there are people who don't want to do anything with respect to vaccinations, they shouldn't have to be nudged. They shouldn't have to be forced to go through any other hoops. It's not the role of us to tell them what to be doing. And that's the problem with this bill. And, what's sad about what's going on here is that there's a very, I think, clear lack of minority rights here. Right? Assuming that this is the minority, right? So the claim of the proponents is that the majority believes in this bill. Okay, if we were to take that at face value, that still doesn't excuse at least probably 7 of us from voting away or chipping away at the rights of those who don't want to participate in this. And that's what's wrong about this from the word go. There's so much more, and like I said, the fact that we're condensing all this into a short time frame is unconscionable. And I for one don't blame any of these people who are outraged that they couldn't have their voices heard. So I'm going to side with them because last I checked, this is America, and we should do everything we can to protect their freedom.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for participating, both those that wanted to voice their comments in support and those that wanted to voice their comments in opposition. I am opposed to 163, and specifically on 2 fronts. The first is the data that is collected and held on to, and that sort of thing. There are no guarantees from where I see that would actually safeguard that data or the people whose data it is collected or connected to. The second one is fundamentally the educational model. And I think the best way that I can convey the disgust that I even have at that segment is it was offered in testimony. It was one of the physicians. It was actually Dr. Washington. And his comment was that the video would allow the opportunity for parents to become informed before making a decision. I'm a parent, and I have 2 boys, and I take that job more seriously than any other responsibility I've ever had in my life. And to suggest that a parent that walks into a physician's office and decides that they are going to delay or decide that they are going to turn down a vaccination is somehow not educated and that they need the government to come in and allow them an opportunity to get the education that they don't have is offensive. I think there's a lot of parents on this committee, and I don't doubt for 1 second the time that you invest in your children and making sure that you are making the best decision. And so I find that part of the bill absolutely repugnant. We have an executive order that was issued in June of 2019 by our governor. And one of the items in there, letter I, it says, report to me on the progress made on implementation of this executive order no later than June 18th, 2020. And then every 6 months thereafter. This executive order is about a year old, and as far as I understand, it's still in place. We're bringing forward yet another bill on immunizations when we haven't even necessarily looked at the issues that our governor said, hey, this is what we should look at. And then we jump on and we say it's 87.5%. That's our vaccination rate amongst kindergartners up to 6 years old. When it's already been stated on the record and it's verified that there is a shortage of the records being complete. If you want to increase vaccination rates by data and statistic, then let's work on updating and making sure that we have the records up to date. You don't sit there and say we're going to educate the masses by a government video and insist that people get certifications and all these other types of things in order to execute some sort of an exemption. We're not even addressing the real issue. And then I'll also comment on the limitation here. It's a Sunday afternoon. I'm new to this. I'm a freshman, right? I'm coming up on my second term. I think I'm going to be reelected. But I've never seen this type of a committee. We're going to come in on a Sunday afternoon at 12 o'clock. We're going to give 3 hours total on one of the most divisive issues when we were told as legislators that we were going to come back and we were going to focus on fast, friendly, and free. And I know that there are those members on this committee that take objection to me making that statement, but that's what we were told. The Speaker of the House, before we came back, in light of coronavirus, was that it was going to be fast, friendly, and free. I'm sorry, there isn't a damn thing that is fast, friendly, or free about this bill. I can't tell you how many bills I participated in PI. Bills that didn't have fiscal notes, bills that had passed unanimously, and yet here we are on a Sunday afternoon giving total testimony time for it was wrong on both sides. An hour and a half to both sides. I'm sorry, I've been on a committee specifically dealing with this issue until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And people's voices were not heard, and they are frustrated. I feel misled. Fast, friendly, and free. I'm going to come back to that. We've laid bills over, and yet this one's going to drive forward. And it is none of those. It has a fiscal note, and we're $3.3 billion approximately in the hole. And yet we're going to push this forward, and yet we're not even allowing the executive order that was published a year ago to actually...
Yeah, 30 seconds, Representative Guy.
The whole thing. It's agenda-driven. We didn't afford people the opportunity to speak. We came in, and where there's other protests going on, it was a Sunday afternoon, people are trying to spend time with their families, and we're going to disrupt all of that. And yet the leadership in this building, and let's be clear, it is the Democrats that are in control. They had the ability to decide how this went down.
Your time is up. Thank you, Representative Geithner. Representative Geithner, your time is up. Thank you.
How the rules would go forward.
Representative Geithner, everybody got their time.
This is one of those rules.
Everybody got their equal time. Your time is up. Thank you. Well, we will all beg to differ. I have not seen anything like this in my time here, and I'll set the timer for me. I don't think I'll need 5 minutes, but I don't want to give myself any more opportunity than anybody else on this committee has, because we all deserve the same right to speak. This has been a divisive issue from the get-go, but there's a lot of things here that I think need to stand corrected. This bill had a 15-hour hearing in the Senate. To say that it did not get its fair hearing is fundamentally wrong. It got its fair and very long hearing in the Senate. That we can't pass a moderate bill to increase our vaccination rates in the middle of a pandemic, well, I don't even have any words for that. I felt it was necessary that we conduct this hearing, but I also had to balance the public health and safety as well as I could for everybody who came. Not just the people who came to testify in support or in opposition, but also to our staff people who work in the building and have no choice but to be here. We're all elected, we chose to be here. So in order to minimize contact, I suggested to have the hearing on a Sunday so that there would be the fewest number of people that there had to be in the room, in the building. So I just want to make that clear. It was not in any way to get in the way of anyone's religious beliefs. It never was. That's not what this was about. Secondly, I want to make sure that, the remarks that Representative Byrd made about what is in this bill, she's a lawyer and she went through that very well. And I don't think I could have said any of that better than she did.
But there's so much misinformation floating around about this bill, and I think Representative Byrd did a very good job in explaining what is really in the bill. I have to say, that's really cute, Representative Geithner. I have to say that, no, I'm talking about what's going on outside. You're right, I shouldn't have said that, and I apologize. I do apologize. That was wrong. I want to say, I wear this mask not to protect me from you, but to protect you from me. And that's what I think vaccines are about. We want to protect the public. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And that's what that's all about. I'm not here to try to force anybody to do anything. Margaret Mead observed when she talked about how civilization was able to move forward was when she found a human skeleton that was approximately 15,000 years old, and the femur had been broken, but it had healed. And there's no way anyone could have healed their broken leg without help from somebody. Civilization depends on us helping each other. And I can't think of a better way to help each other than to get your vaccinations and to get your kids vaccinated. But I don't want to force you to do that, and this is not what this bill does. Thank you for your time and attention today. Ms. Wallace, please call the roll.
Representatives Basin,
No.
Champion,
No.
Geithner, Marquez Lewis,
Yes.
Kip,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Valdez,
Yes.
Williams,
Hell no.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes. The bill passes 7-4. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. The committee is adjourned.
It passed. 7-4. Fixed price.
7-4. We got their names.
Okay, now let's go.
We're going to do. We will not lose hope because people are waking up every single day, and you know that. You have been watching people who have never questioned vaccines before ever. You have watched them say, hell no, I'm not getting a COVID vaccine. I believe in vaccines, but I'm not getting a flu shot. Your job is to contact everybody you know, and you tell them the truth about vaccines. If you are silent, stay silent no more. Share stuff on your Facebook. Tweet these people. Spread the truth. Send out the high wire every single week to every email in your list. And then you go and you find one of these clipboards and you sign up with Concerned Colorado and you volunteer for Rupert and Samantha and Greg and all of our other candidates, and you walk door to door and you hand out flyers for them. You volunteer to make phone calls for them. You can have fundraisers to raise money for them, and you get freedom candidates elected from now on.
Yeah!
Tell ya!
No more tyranny!
If Representative Geithner Williams Baisley will come out and have a little bit of pep talk to us.
It's not over! It just begun.
So we have a couple of different people from different organizations. Leslie wants to say a word from Democrats for Medical Autonomy.
This isn't a loss. Look at what we did today. Look at what we did today.
Yeah!
The government owns our children. The government doesn't own our children any more than they own their business. This isn't a law.
Thanks.
I want you to think about something. Who do you know in your life that is a liberal or a person who's in the left and a person that doesn't know about this? Because as a Democrat, this is a Democrat issue. They just don't know it yet. So reach out to them, bring them into the fold. But please, I understand greed. This is heartbreaking. But please, do not look like this was not a win today. What we pulled off today is about heart. And you know who won integrity? We did. You know who won truth?
Yes.
We did. You know who won freedom? We did. So the oppressors will never win, ever.
So this bill was sponsored by Representative Kyle Mollica. This fine woman here is running against him. House District number 34, and her name is Audrey Herman.
I want you to take all this righteous anger and put it into every single freedom fighter's campaign. Do not lose steam. We have to have you to win this. We are up against Democrats. Without you, we will not win. We need you to step up. We need you to donate. We need you to make phone calls. We need you to flyer houses. We need you to do whatever it's going to take. Do you want us to have control over this house? Do you want us? Do you want freedom fighters to be in this house? Step up! Please! We cannot do this without you. I am up here. I am fighting for each and every one of you, for every single one of your kids. If this were about me, I'd leave the state. It is not about me. It is about every single child here. It is about every single one of you. Our rights are never up for debate. Ever. Ever.
Ever.
HD 34, Mullica, you're out the door. HD 34!